A 10-year-old boy is dead. His grieving father makes a pledge.
I stood over Robbie's deathbed and promised to him that I will find out what went wrong.
The boy had a rare but treatable disease. His anxious parents claim doctors missed 9 chances to save him.
What they've put us through for 13 years, I just can't accept it.
It took the couple years to find out why some of the doctors failed their son.
These people have been, at the very least, incompetent and at the worst, grossly negligent.
The family also claim these doctors forged documents to cover up their neglect. Police have also been severely reprimanded.
Every mistake that could have been made seems to have been made in the case.
Investigators branded the force responsible for policing half of Wales institutionally incompetent.
They had failed, and they knew it, to investigate Robbie's death properly.
Tonight, the story of an ordinary Welsh father who's shaken the British establishment to the core. In 1989, Robbie Powell was a healthy 10-year-old schoolboy, a much-loved member of a close family.
He was a character. He was a bit older than his age, to be honest with you. Something special about Robbie there was. He was a very outgoing boy, always liked to be with people, always liked to help people. He always used to be in the house here helping his father when we were doing the house up.
The family lived at Ystrad Gunlais in the Swansea Valley. The doctors concerned were part of a well-respected group practice. They'd been the local police surgeons for over 10 years. Robbie's childhood was normal. This film taken a few weeks before he died. But inside the little boy's body, a time bomb was ticking away. Robbie had Addison's disease. It's a disease of the adrenal glands above the kidneys. They're supposed to produce vital hormones, but Robbie's weren't working properly. The condition is very rare in children, but it can be detected with a simple blood test. In December 1989, Robbie fell ill and was rushed to hospital.
He looked seriously ill. I mean, I actually cried when I arrived because I hadn't realised he was seriously ill. He was hollow-eyed. He'd been vomiting. He just looked ill. He looked as if he could possibly die.
The boy was taken to Morriston Hospital in Swansea. He was treated by a consultant paediatrician, Dr. William Forbes. He suspected Addison's disease, but didn't do the simple test that would have revealed it. The parents believe this was the first of 9 chances that doctors had of finding out what was wrong with Robbie, but the opportunity wasn't taken. Robbie had just over 4 months to live.
My wife actually asked one of the doctors in charge of Robbie's care what was wrong, and he just blurted out gastroenteritis caused by a throat infection. Diane communicated that to me, and we accepted it.
That diagnosis was wrong, but Robbie recovered and was sent home. In January, he went back to the hospital for a checkup, but again the vital test wasn't done. The parents believe it was a second chance gone. Dr. Forbes had missed another opportunity. The little boy had less than 3 months to live. The consultant did write to Robbie's GPs at the health centre, saying he suspected there was a problem with Robbie's adrenal glands. For a couple of months, Robbie was fine, but by April 1990, his health began to fail. His dad took him back to the surgery.
Because of the concern we had while he was in hospital the first time and the short period of time that Robbie became unwell, we thought it's best that we take him straight down to the GP to have a look at him again.
He was seen by Dr. Elwyn Hughes, the doctor who'd sent him to hospital the previous December. He didn't read Robbie's medical notes, which contained the suspicion that there might be something wrong with his adrenal glands.
Well, he examined Robert. I let him get on with his job. He said he could find nothing wrong and reassured me. And I accepted that reassurance. I was pleased to accept it.
For Will Powell, it was the 3rd chance to save Robbie. But Dr. Hughes could find nothing amiss. No one knew, but Robbie had only 15 days to live. He went back to school, but a few days later, a teacher sent him home.
He was just feeling unwell with vague symptoms, which we now know was caused by the adrenal insufficiency, the Addison's disease.
Robbie was taken back to the surgery and seen by Dr. Nicola Flower.
She also said she could find nothing wrong, didn't make a diagnosis, didn't prescribe or advise any medication, and I was reassured that Robbie wasn't ill or seriously ill.
The fourth chance had slipped away. Dr. Flower didn't read his notes either. Robbie had only 11 days left to live. Over the next 5 days, Robbie's condition gradually worsened.
He started to vomit, and therefore we took him down to the health centre again, but this time Diane came with me because she believed at this stage there was certainly something wrong with him.
This was the fifth chance to save Robbie. Dr. Mike Williams was the GP who saw him.
Dr. Williams examined Robert. He again could find nothing wrong. He read the medical notes.
Dr. Williams said he would refer the boy back to the hospital consultant, but he didn't do it. Robbie had 6 days to live. By Easter Sunday, he was so weak he could hardly walk. He was taken to see another doctor, Dr. Paul Bolatz, one of the senior partners.
He could find nothing wrong. We gave him a full history of the previous doctors, the fact that Robert had been referred, as we were told by Dr. Williams.
This was the sixth chance to save Robbie. Dr. Bolatz had also not worked out what was wrong. Time was running out, and Robbie had just 2 days to live. The next day, Robbie's condition hadn't improved, and another senior partner, Dr. Keith Hughes, came to see him.
He examined Robbie, thought that he needed a blood sugar test, I assume because of the weakness that he was made aware of. He went to his car, come back, he said the test equipment's out of date, he couldn't give it. He debated whether or not to admit Robert to hospital, but decided not to.
Another chance had gone. If Dr. Hughes had done the blood test, it might have shown something was seriously wrong. The little boy's life now had only hours to run.
But because 5 doctors had now seen him, we were reassured he wasn't seriously ill. If there was a problem with Robert, we obviously didn't think it was serious enough that he would die.
The next day was Robbie's last.
Robert then wanted to go to the toilet, and as my wife assisted him to the toilet, he collapsed and fainted. Diane screamed. I went into the bathroom, and Robert's head was on my wife's lap. His eyes were closed.
He rang the health centre. It was Dr. Nicola Flower who came to the house. This was the 8th chance to save Robbie, but Dr. Flower said he wasn't seriously ill.
I tried to convince her to get Robert admitted, and my wife did, but she didn't want to know. She just said there's nothing seriously wrong, there's no need.
Dr. Flower did not send the boy to hospital. He had just over 7 hours to live. A few hours later, Robbie's frantic parents called the GP back.
Dr. Flower then, under pressure, agreed to refer Robert. She made a telephone call to the hospital. I prepared Robert to take him in. I assumed that they were going to have an ambulance. I came downstairs. Dr. Flower was just finishing writing the referral letter. As she was putting it in the envelope, I asked her, have you ordered an ambulance? She said no, and threw the referral letter at me and said take him by car, and she stormed out the house.
This was the last possible chance to save Robbie. Dr. Flower finally agreed to send him to hospital, but some experts say it was already too late. Robbie's life was fading away. His parents drove him to Morriston Hospital, to the ward where he'd been a patient before.
I lay Robbie on the bed as instructed, and the nurse said, how long has this child been like this? I said, the doctors just said that there's nothing wrong with him. With that, my wife almost faints and has to be taken from the room. I look at Robbie. Excuse me. I looked at Robert. His eyes were wide open, as was his mouth. I said, Robbie, Robbie, and he was motionless. He'd taken his last conscious breath.
Robbie Powell's 9 lives had run out. Doctors tried desperately to save him. He was pronounced dead that evening.
I stood over Robbie's deathbed and promised to him that I will find out what went wrong, because it was clear to us that something had gone wrong. We were continually told he wasn't seriously ill, and now he was dead.
After Robbie died, classmates at his school planted this tree in his memory. Today it's 14 years old, and so is Will Powell's battle to keep his promise to his son. He was determined to find out why he had died and who was responsible. A few days after Robbie's death, Dr. Keith Hughes came to the house. He had Robbie's health centre notes with him. In the records, the hospital consultant Dr. Forbes said that Robbie needed the test for Addison's disease. It's known as an ACTH test.
I slowly went through the medical file, which was very thin. I turned over a page, and on the back of the page it had in type, information, needs ACTH test, parents informed. I immediately jumped up and said, what the hell is this letter? I know nothing about the test.
Will Powell was so concerned about this letter that he asked a local clergyman to come to the house and witness it.
The thing that Mr. Powell is most concerned about was this reference to this ACTH test, the adrenaline insufficiency, and this reference to Addison's disease. So in reading through these papers, this is what I looked for, and this is what I noted.
Sadly, the Reverend Thomas is now dead, but he did make a sworn statement. He said he'd also seen a letter from Dr. Forbes. All of the doctors deny any knowledge of that letter, but Will Powell is adamant it was there.
There was a further letter in the notes as well from Forbes telling them to get Robert back to hospital if he had a recurrence of vomiting or abdominal pain, and he'd failed to do that. I felt that these doctors had no defence, irrespective of the rareness of this condition. They didn't have to diagnose it. All they had to know is that it had been suspected and carry out the instructions of Forbes to get Robert straight back to hospital.
A few days later, Dr. Michael Williams also came to the house.
Dr. Williams came to see Diane, who was obviously grief-stricken by Robbie's death and needed medication. I asked Dr. Williams in the presence of Diane on 2 occasions whether he'd referred Robbie, and he said that he had referred him back to Dr. Forbes.
That referral might have saved Robbie, but when his father asked Dr. Forbes at Morriston Hospital, he told him he'd received no such letter.
As far as I was concerned, Williams had told me in this house he'd referred Robert. I had no reason to disbelieve him. Dr. Forbes told me weeks later that he had not received a referral from Dr. Williams. I had no reason to disbelieve him, but both of them could not have been telling the truth.
But who was telling the truth, Dr. Forbes or Dr. Williams? Will Powell was determined to find out. In part 2, his epic struggle which went all the way to the Welsh office and a series of astonishing revelations.